Hello, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Ciira Maina. I'm with an organization known as Data Science Africa, and I also teach electrical engineering at a university known as Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Nyeri, Kenya. And I'm here to talk about Data Science Africa and the work we've been doing building an African data science community. I'd really like to thank the organizers of the Research Summit for extending the invitation, giving me an opportunity to share the work we've been doing with Data Science Africa and also to exchange views with you. So it's unfortunate that we can't be in the same space, but due to the current situation, but I hope this is the next best thing, exploiting technology to be able to still communicate and reach one another. So initially, I would really like to try and take the bold step of putting Africa in context. We are Data Science Africa. Africa is really key to us. So, as an African, what does Africa mean to me? So, first thing is the people of Africa and their diversity, the various axes of diversity. You have young, old, urban, rural, ancient, modern. And so on this slide, I just have, the things I think of in terms of the African people. We are very diverse. Kenya, for example, has over 40 communities, which are, independent cultures. And there are lots of diversity of culture. So, Africa itself is very diverse. So, in terms of people, so I have some, some of my favorite Africans, so to speak, is like the lady I show here, Wangari Maathai, on the left, who's actually from my hometown of Nyeri. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004, and she was really a great environmentalist. Motivated a lot of Kenyans to plant trees, conserve the environment, and she's the reason we have a lot of green spaces in Nairobi, the capital. I also show a picture there of the ancient King Mansa Musa from Mali. This is circa the 13th century, so really Africa has long history, from ancient times, from the beginnings even. I also show Wole Soyinka there on the right. I'm trying to give him a little bit of competition with the beard. He is the Nobel laureate for literature in 1986, And I also show a lady there cultivating her field, and to show the varied lifestyles that we have, dignified lifestyles, rural lifestyles. In addition to people, there are places. So you may have various images you think of when you think of Africa. What I would like to do is to, just a counter sort of narrative to the popular images on the press and things of that nature. So on the left you see Nairobi by night. Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. It's a city like any other big city. We have in the middle the ancient city of Timbuktu. That's a picture of the Sankore University, which was the heart of scholarship in the Middle Ages. And this is on the African continent. And also going way back to the ancient pyramids of Egypt. So all this is diverse places in Africa. And just to really put the point that, there's a lot of things that need to be put into context when you think of the African continent. We also have, problems like anywhere else. But I, as a scientist, like to focus on solutions. And I always like to, I like the way the SDGs are framed, the Sustainable Development Goals. And it allows us to really focus on solutions. So for example, this noble goal of no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, and going on all the way through to peace and justice and partnership for the goals. All those help us frame the solutions we seek. and to accept the problems we have. And I like to think that these problems are global problems, and the more we take a more global approach, the better for us. So we've tried to put Africa in some context. So let's try and see what's the case for data science, so that we can then bring the two together, data science and Africa, and see what data science Africa is all about. So what's the case for data science? Data has always been at the heart of the scientific enterprise. But recently, a number of fields have been revolutionized by the availability of tons of data, from which now new insights can be drawn. So for example, in health, we now have DNA sequencing, which makes the idea of precision health feasible. So health really targeted to your individual genetic makeup. Things in agriculture, there's a lot of weather data, satellite imagery, imaging from crops to help predict diseases and things of that nature. So urban planning, there's a lot of traffic data. So a lot of fields. So I'd like to highlight a few projects out of Africa. So like the Human Heredity and Health in Africa project. There's the AirCore project, which is I'll discuss a little bit out of Makerere, and similarly MCrops, which is also out of Makerere. These are projects that are out of people affiliated to Data Science Africa. And we also have the project known as TAMO, which is aiming to really monitor the African continent in terms of weather. So there are lots of projects already beginning to really try and exploit data. However, what ends up happening is that, you see, I like this quote from Neil Lawrence, who is a professor at Cambridge and also one of the advisory board members of DSA, that there's a sea of data, but most of it is undrinkable. That you really need to do a lot of work to be able to get insights from data. So how then do we now move from, we've seen Africa data, now bring the two together, Data Science Africa. So for us on the African continent to be able to really exploit the potential of all the data available to us, or actually begin to collect new data to solve the problems we saw earlier, it's important for us to plug a few gaps which exist. They exist in a lot of places in the world, but we are based here in Africa and we're interested in plugging them here. So there are gaps in skills in mathematics, engineering, computer science, statistics. These are fields which really enable you to really mine data and build systems that can take these insights, can extract these insights from the data. There are gaps in the availability of data in itself. So to solve certain problems, you need to actually begin by collecting the data. There's also infrastructural problems, or gaps where compute resources which are essential for data science to proceed. You need compute. So a lot of these resources are limited here on our continent. So those are the gaps. And I would really like to zero in on the skills gap, because that's what we've been doing a lot of work in Data Science Africa. So it exists in data science, in machine learning, AI, and a number of us on the African continent have identified this gap. So at Data Science Africa, we saw that we really needed to first start by building capacity. So training people in data science, machine learning, and AI, and other affiliated fields. There are other sister organizations like the Deep Learning Indaba out of South Africa, AIMS, which I think has a presence in South Africa, in Rwanda, in Senegal, which is the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. We have another organization known as Data Science Nigeria. So this is just a sample of them. There are several people who've seen this gap, skills gap, and are attempting to plug it. So I'll focus now on what DSA is all about. So DSA, I like to think of it as a grassroots organization that really started ground up. So it's about increasing the data science expertise in Africa. And how do we do that? We run summer schools where we do training of on data science methods, machine learning methods, fundamentals of statistics, etc. And also hold workshops where we now exchange ideas in projects where people present their ongoing work. So you have a teaching, but you also have a dissemination arm. And we really focus on solving problems that are relevant in the African context. And whatever that may mean to whoever, it's not like something that we only accept certain types of problems. We accept that there's a lot of diversity in what that may mean, and it's intentional. A key thing that we're interested in doing is creating a community of researchers. So by bringing these people together, we're really aiming to actually foster a community, exchange best practice, and mentor younger ones when they experience the work of older and more experienced researchers or practitioners. And so our meetings are also aimed at fostering this idea of community. And I would like to just take a small detour and tell you a little bit more about community. So in my community, now when I say my community, I mean in Kenya, where I'm from. We have a saying, and we say "Roaboromwe rutia bagadarwa." What that does mean? It means, it's a proverb, first off, and what it means is that you can't use one peg to set up a hide when you're trying to dry it. So I show you a picture there of people trying to set out a hide to dry. So you see some wooden pegs, and that is what we call a roabo. And the idea is you can't use one. As you can see, there are quite a number of them that are used. And so really, a lot of African philosophy is encapsulated, is contained in these proverbs. And I like to highlight them in this way. And it really does take a team, just like you see the variation in the size of these pegs. It really takes a lot of diversity on the teams to actually execute projects like DSA. So where did we start? What's the beginning? So our inaugural event was organized and sponsored by Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Nyeri in June 2015. And we had this format which I was trying to explain earlier, which is we had an initial summer school where we have lectures, people are exposed to methodology, techniques, and then 2 days at the end of the week of workshop where we invite now researchers, and the students stay on and they're able to learn about, to see the techniques they've been learning in practice. So that was the first event. I like this picture. This shows, the people who attended in the beginning. A lot of them are still affiliated to DSA. So it's nice to see that, yes, we are building a community. Now, since then, what has happened? Since 2015, we've had 8 events in 6 countries. The most recent event was actually late last month, and in late June, I should say. Sorry, late July. And it was held virtually due to the current pandemic. However, we've had events in all East African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. We also had an event in Ethiopia in 2018. And we then moved to, we are Data Science Africa, so we focused a lot on East Africa. And then in 2018, we had our first West African event, which was held in Abuja, Nigeria. And then in 2019, we had an event in Ghana. So we were hoping to have an event in Senegal this year, but due to the current situation, that won't happen. But so our idea has been to go to as many African countries as possible, the entire continent. So on this map, you see the countries where we've held events are in blue, and those where we've drawn participants are in green, and of course the ones in blue also have contributed participants. So I would like to spend some time talking about what motivate our core tenets, what are our principles, our tenets, because it has helped foster an organization which is cohesive and is achieving certain goals and has had a level of success. Our first tenet is that we are by Africa. I'll elaborate a little bit about what that means to us. We have a student focus. We are about solutions. We aim to be sustainable and inclusive and also agile. So what does it mean that we are by Africa? First off, all communities, all peoples have agency. They like to do for themselves and drive their own agenda, as opposed to having things done to and for them. So since we are Data Science Africa, it makes sense that a lot of our organizers are based in the African continent, are from Africa, identify as Africans. However, we remember we need more than one peg to set up this hide. So we have partners all over the world. We have advisors from all over the world as well. So, but the driving force is African. So that's important to us. The second one I would like to focus on of our tenets is that we have a student focus. Again, I would like to share another Kikuyu proverb. And we say in my community that Maudomo the no diganiro. What does that mean? It's about that everything is about leaving it to the next person to proceed with it. And in this case, you can look at this as being leave it to the next generation. So when we are doing what we're doing, we focus on the students because they'll be able to take it a step further. And if we don't do this, then the organization will really just come to a grinding halt. So how has this shown itself? Our hands-on approach, our student focus. So it has motivated a hands-on approach to instruction. Initially, when we started, we were like in our first event, we had a lot of theoretical exercises. And then we realized that for people to really identify with data science instruction, data is at the heart of it. And collection of data is key in a lot of problems that are of interest in our setup. So we partnered. In fact, this was the first time when we started this idea, we were able to partner with ARM to now get sensor systems, set them up, collect data, and then use that data for training. So here you see some pictures from an event in Nyeri. And here, Nyeri, we have a conservancy, and the middle picture shows we were trying to collect images from our wildlife conservancy. We had set up a camera trap using a Raspberry Pi. We were hoping to get some wild species there. There's some zebra and others. We took a team photo using our camera trap. So anyway, now those images are then used when you're teaching things like image classification. And then on the right, when you're teaching things like time series data, you collect data from a greenhouse. So on the right, you see one participant setting up a temperature monitoring system in a greenhouse at our university. So this hands-on approach is geared to enhance the student experience. We also have a program known as the Young Scholars, the DSA Young Scholars, and here the idea is to mentor promising, all participants in between the events. So here, for example, I would like to highlight the work of Jared Makaria, who was a student at DKUT, and he attended DSA, I think, in 2017 in Arusha, introduced to certain sensor systems by Yan Nyumbum, who was then at ARM. And came back to Kimathi, set up a sensor system in our conservancy to monitor water levels. So you see his sensor system on the left. At one point he was called urgently to come and save his sensor because it had rained heavily and it was at risk of being submerged. So really being exposed to getting data, and then improve the system. So you see there the third picture from the left is an improved system, and then he also developed a system that was able to monitor the greenhouse. So this is a student being mentored to continuously improve his work. I also like to highlight another student now from Makerere, Benjamin Akera. He was mentored at the AI lab in Makerere. He attended quite a number of DSA events. And currently he is a research intern at Miller in Montreal. So, and this is one of the leading AI research labs in the world. So, this is somebody on a trajectory, upward trajectory, and part of our DSA community. He's returned to as an instructor. He was teaching in the most recent event. So I think what that means is really we are achieving what we aim to do, which is build a community, which also now, and we are also leaving to the next generation so that it's in safe hands and it can proceed. So another thing is, mentoring new trainers. So here, as I've said, several attendees return as trainers. And we also partner with our sister organizations that I showed you are also interested in plugging this gap. So recently we had some of our students teaching IoT at the Deep Learning in Daba. I had mentioned that, we are about solutions. So I've dealt a bit on the core tenet of student focus, now about solutions. So here we are really focused on deploying solutions. So a lot of our affiliate organizations, so the universities affiliated to us and the research labs in those universities are developing projects aimed at solving problems. So I'd like to highlight the MCROPS project, which was led by Ernest Mwebaze at the AI lab in Makerere. Here they were using images to diagnose disease in cassava, which is a staple in Uganda. And they've done a lot of work in going to the level of actually looking at severity of disease incidence. So really high quality machine learning work that's relevant to our context. Another project which we've been working on here at Dedan Kimathi is this idea of acoustic monitoring of ecosystems. So we've deployed sensors in the Mount Kenya National Park, in our own conservancy, and here we are collecting acoustic data and using it to infer the health of the ecosystem by focusing on trying to identify the birds within the acoustic recordings because they serve as an indicator of ecosystem health. So this is another project in an area which I think is quite important, that of preserving our ecosystem. Another project is AirCo, which I had mentioned earlier, out of, again, Makerere, which is really a leading light in the DSA community. So here they've deployed air quality monitoring sensors all over Uganda. And I think there was just one sensor before they started, and now you can tell the air quality in several regions of Uganda, which is an amazing achievement. So that's us trying to really also do, not just talk about data science, but actually do it. And now we are really also moving into growing the community. So recently we've launched the DSA Research Award. So we are trying to give up to 10 grants of $10,000 for people to really take their projects a step further, implement them. We are starting out country chapters so that there is momentum in between events. Webinars on topical issues. We have a mentor program, and we are also hoping to set up a research assistant program where we can have people coming to the labs which are actually implementing projects and learn from them from wherever they may be on the continent, and actually spread that community of practice. So, and that's really what we are hoping to achieve in the future. So I would like to end by saying how can you be part of this community? You can attend our events, you can present there or teach, you can mentor students, you can also sponsor us, and really a lot of other things which we can't think of right now. So there you have our website. You can also email us, or you can email me directly. There is my email address, ciira.maina@dkut.ac.ke. So finally, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors who include ARM, who really supported our organization and supported our events. I would also like to thank the partner universities, including my own university, DKUT, Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, and say a big thank you to you for listening. And I hope to engage with you, and I look forward to answering your questions and also engaging further during the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ciira, for joining us and for sharing all your deep insights into Data Science Africa and the kinds of challenges that you're trying to overcome. I'm delighted to be joined by Ciira for a live Q&A right now. So to begin with, we'll start with the first question. Ciira, you mentioned in your presentation around solving problems relevant to the African context. Can you share some examples of what that might look like?
Well, as I think I tried to highlight in the talk, there's no one that will be very diverse. I mean, those kind of problems will range problems that people face in their normal day-to-day living. You know, you want to grow food, you want food to eat, you want to solve transport problems. So the only thing is that they'll be different in each environment. So even within Africa, you know, we may not grow cassava. People in Uganda may grow cassava. There'll be unique challenges related to their unique growing conditions. So my thing here is that let's be aware of context, and problems differ in different localities. We don't have a big traffic problem in Nyeri. If I was in Nairobi, on the other hand, transport would be high up on my agenda in terms of problems in which I could try and employ data science and AI. So I think it's that sort of nuance, and also, yeah, and just understanding that, yes, well, some things may be transferable across contexts. A number of things may need to be really tailored, you know, to the particular context in which you're dealing. So even Africa itself is very, very broad. So it's a broad generalization there.
Yeah, definitely.
I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, considering Africa as the many countries that make up the African continent as opposed to one landmass. So we've got a lot of questions coming through. Obviously, people were very impressed by your talk. I'm going to go from the top here. How hard is it to keep local talent local? How bad is brain drain? And is there anything that anybody else in different regions can do about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely hard to keep it local, but I think the solution to that is not to necessarily put any artificial restrictions like on movement or anything, but to first increase the amount of people who have the skills. And therefore, I think out of that there's always a fraction who are very attached to home and things of that nature. And I think that is one way to cure it. And also building communities where, even if you're in the diaspora, for example, you're out of the African continent. Nowadays, I think I showed you on the part of the DSA board, we have Africans all over the world. So you can make the distance extremely small by use of technology, take advantage of technology. But you also definitely need a local presence, and that's what we are aiming to do. You know, like if you think about it, on average, a university may have 100 graduates, and we have maybe of the order. I mean, we could be churning out 1,000 computer scientists, engineers. If you just keep, 10%, and ensure those 10% have the right support I think that's good enough to fix the brain drain problem, and also ensure that we ensure that the links, the international links, are maintained. I think that's one way. And other organizations can, I mean, if you, for example, if you're a company, say hypothetically ARM, and you have a group, you've employed a number of people in the African continent, if you can help them to reach back and support communities from where they've come, I think that would be a useful way to go about it.
And the next question links to a point that you just mentioned there around technology as an enabler. Do you think that virtual communities through online webinars, conferences, and so on will make an impact on or ease the access to knowledge and technology?
Yeah, I think so. I think they can go some of the way. They can go definitely some of the way. But what we've seen in DSA is that people yearn for that face-to-face, and also the interactions, which are not online interactions are great if that's the only thing available. But if you have an option to also have communities that support each other in a with more physical presence, that is ideal. So you see, like if the local country chapters we are trying to set up with DSA, where people can exchange ideas, because even in my experience as a teacher, I can give the online classes, but everybody's yearning for that face-to-face, one-on-one interactions. But definitely online communities, online courses, very big help. In fact, the last DSA, as I said, was virtual. We just have to integrate this, use all the technologies at our disposal.
And just building on that slightly, in terms of global conferences, there's been some push by the Black in AI community to increase access to, for example, international conferences that have challenges with, for example, visas or being able to get things in time to attend these kinds of conferences. Do you think that that organizations or companies can be thinking about that in this more virtual world? Is there an opportunity to broaden the scope of who is included in these decisions, in these conferences, in these events?
Yeah, I think this has opened a big opportunity. People are saying that we can be together even if we are not, and you can open up your events to bigger communities by just taking advantage of online presence, virtual communities. So I think it's a good thing. Now you visa restrictions out of the window, air ticket costs out of the window. I think it has opened our eyes to the possibilities of, in the absence of the means to make it physically. Yes, let's take advantage of this. But also, I think there's nothing. You see, the one thing about international events is that they're one big mix, and it's hard to satisfy everyone when you're trying to satisfy everyone. So when you have a more local event like a DSA, which is more focused on the African context, and people can make it physically, I think that's why local events have a huge place to play, have a huge part to play. Sorry.
And Data Science Africa is filling a hole, as you said. It's plugging a void where many organisations are not necessarily looking at those challenges in certain regions and the talent that is available locally to be able to solve those issues. And you mentioned in the panel yesterday about the restrictions in place in terms of access to data, access to devices, access to education. Do you have any advice on how people listening on this call, whether they're in an academic institution or from a partner organisation, how they might be able to unblock that bottleneck?
I think, one thing to do is to be aware of it. So if you're aware, for example, let's say you're an NGO, you're collecting data and or you're publishing some results and there may be the data is behind a paywall, or it's not even open access. I mean, it's actually small things like that, understanding, and also going on, if you're if open source is, I think, a big will play a big part in that. And also this move to, I like the fact that devices are getting cheap, and we are also seeing devices being locally manufactured. You know, it's the to entry has been lowered enough that we can think of, you know, creating our own electronics in our lab. You know, we'll etch the devices, we'll deploy them, and when we are solving problems in the local context, that quick turnaround, so that you can say, I've deployed this device, it's not working, I need to tweak it, but the cost to tweak it isn't astronomical, so that you throw your hands up and you say, well, this thing will have to be developed elsewhere. I think that's a good thing, that now costs are going down, but it's important that we have more of the supply chain a bit more diffuse, so that, you know, like we've seen with this COVID crisis, when if certain areas are, if transport is impeded, and then you're still stuck if you don't have the local capacity to do things when you need to.
Mm-hmm. The next question we've got, is there an equivalent of a European community research programs under the African Union? Any regional equivalents, and are you leveraging such mechanisms in Data Science Africa?
I'm not sure I get that question. Maybe please repeat it.
Is there an equivalent of European community research programs under the African Union or an equivalent organization?
Yeah, I think they'll, if you get it right. If I get it right, they're asking about the AU doing similar things to the EU, and maybe supporting. I know the AU is big on. I think everybody is doing a part. So they support higher education. I know they offer sponsorships. They support centers of excellence. The thing is, there's a lot of room, and I think they are playing their part the best way they can, and I think we are more grassroots, so we are closer to the action than, for example, an AU, which is more a governmental organization, and therefore, you know, very top down. We are more bottom up.
Mm-hmm. And so in the talk, when you mentioned about data collection, there's a question around who should take care of that, who should be responsible for that: governments, NGOs, private companies, and what are the implications for getting that wrong?
I think it's almost a cop-out that the answer is all the above, but I think really the key thing should be that there should be a clear ownership of of the data. So if you're collecting the data in Africa in an African context, I think personally the ownership of the data should remain with the country in the biggest division, but also now locally from the communities from which you're collecting that data. So the thing about getting it wrong is people exploiting data and the benefits not accruing to the data source. So you're able to develop systems, improve systems using this data, but none of those benefits accrue to the original people from whom, or areas from where the data was collected. So I think all those have a role to play. A lot of governments are now thinking about data privacy laws to ensure that, you know, personal data, for example, is protected. Data, even for like the data I collect, there should be a lot more scrutiny about what's happening with the data we collect. And I think maybe that people often, personally identifiable data is usually the most immediate concern, but then data of all sorts needs to be protected. So I think really everybody needs to take care about data, but there needs to be regulation, and often the best regulator is governments, though of course it can be a bit tricky. you can end up with over-regulation or regulation stifling development and innovation. It's a balance that needs to be struck.
Yeah, sure. And a question that relates to a few of the points that you've mentioned. Do you think that global technology companies collaborate with African universities enough and invest, for example, opening R&D facilities and hiring local talent?
Well, they have attempted to. I'll say that they've attempted to. I think what ends up happening is they come with an ethos that's not indigenous to Africa, and therefore often it ends up being an African entity in Africa. I think it ends up, so often it looks like good PR. If you end up now, because what ends up happening is that what's coming out of those institutions is not necessarily coming from really the communities themselves. And and I'm not throwing anything at any companies that have tried to do this, but because it's very difficult to do right. And often what ends up happening is that the speed with which you can do it right is slower than the speed at which companies like to move. So companies like to move really fast, but doing things right from the grassroots takes time.
Yeah.
So I think that ends up being a problem, because you need to build, local capacity, or in 5 years identify problems. Then and a company may want to have something flashy in a month or 2 months or a year maximum. So it's understanding the cycles of what you're doing, of trying to engage full way.
Yeah. And I just want to ask you, we've got time for a few quick questions before we have to wrap up, but if you have an ask to the audience, what would it be?
Well, they've had my talk, so they had me at the end saying Data Science Africa is a big tent. So we're always looking for people to speak at our events, give their experiences deploying tech, interacting with tech, either at policy level, development. And I know this is a kind of audience that's really into technology. So talking at our events is a big thing for us. We are all about students. So if somebody has bandwidth to, listen to students and, guide them a bit, either as a mentor, that is great. If you're from a technology company that would like to have fruitful interactions with an African organization, we are there. When hopefully we'll be able to have in-person events, but we are really growing the community. That requires resources. You can pitch in, you can help us, you can sponsor us. But yeah, so there are many ways that the audience can interact with us.
Great, thank you. And if anybody wants to hear more from you, is there anywhere that they could do that?
Well, yes, I'll be talking at the ARM Dev Summit in October, so look out for that. So a little bit more detail about the work in bioacoustics and environmental resource monitoring. So a bit more technical than philosophical.
Either way is fine for us, Ciira. Thank you very much for joining us today and for being part of this Q&A discussion too. I hope the audience have enjoyed it. The next session is going to be on ARM research enablement, happening in the plenary in around 5 minutes. Thanks very much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions that we have in store.